Secretary of the branch here, Prashant Kumar. Learned speaker of today's session, Advocate Niranjan Rao Garu. Senior members of the profession, respected past chairman, my colleagues in the managing committee, my dear professional colleagues, a very good evening to you all and welcome you all to this virtual seminar of today's on the topic new labor codes and its implications with reference to statutory payments. We, the members of Visakhapatnam branch, convey our heartfelt thanks to Speaker Advocate Niranjan Rao Garu for accepting our request to address the members of Visakhapatnam branch. He is an expert professional in dealing with labor laws and other allied laws in Hyderabad. He is also having many clientele in Visakhapatnam, as he says just now. It's very nice. He is connected with Visakhapatnam also, and now connected with as a speaker to Visakhapatnam branch members. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. The government is all set to regularize the new labor codes with rules expected to come into force shortly. The organizations, employers will need to synchronize themselves with new rules with new upcoming definitions of wages, gratuity, and new ways of calculating provident fund and other submissions. The 4 new labor codes: Code on Social Security 2020, Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code 2020, Industrial Relations Code 2020, and Code on Wages 2019 will subsume the existing 29 central labor and industrial laws and aim to avoid multiplicity of laws. Why does the government want to enact the codes? The government wants to facilitate ease of compliance and achieve equity for all. The new codes will ensure better use of technology for various compliances and effective enforcement. The new labor codes also raise concerns with reference to whether they shall apply only to blue-collar employees or would they apply to all employees in general. It is clearly mentioned in the new labor codes that the codes will apply to all employees of an organization, irrespective of their role, level, nature of duties, salary, with minimal expectations. There are new norms include employer-centric and employee-centric, many norms which will be dealt in detail by today's speaker. The government seems to have made a conscious efforts towards balancing the rights of employees vis-a-vis those employers. Certain new and interesting concepts have been introduced in the labor codes, including provisions in relation to fixed term employees, worker reskilling fund, social security for workers and platform workers, recognition of trade union, notice period for strikes, compounding of certain offences, so on and so forth. The new codes also prescribe the changes with respect to hiring of employees through third parties or contractors. Finally, the transformative changes in the labor codes are expected to give a major boost to labor reforms and impact many organizations in every sector. It is the objective of the government that the new laws should reduce the complexities, improve ease of compliance, bring in more transparency and accountability, and should help both employers and workers. The new codes are expected to enhance the compliances significantly, especially due to the increased penal liabilities. The government is relooking at the proposed rules under the 4 labor codes in an effort to allay some of the industry concerns. So what is the new definition of wages? What is the new impact of new definition of wages? What are all the new norms? To explain all these and many other issues involved in labor codes, we have renowned speaker, CA Mr. Niranjan Rao, a senior advocate from Hyderabad with us today. Members, it is very sad to know about the sudden demise of one of our senior members yesterday, CA Pemmaraju Venkata Vittal, aged 71 years. He worked with Dredging Corporation of India, Visakhapatnam, and after retirement is practicing at Visakhapatnam. Yesterday, myself and Secretary Prashant went to his house to pay homage. I request members, let us maintain silence for a minute for his soul to attain Sadgati. Now I request CA Arunapriya to introduce the speaker of today's virtual session, Advocate Niranjan Rao garu. Arunapriya voice రావట్లేదు, అన్మ్యూట్ చేయండి ఒకసారి.
Thank you. Hello.
Yeah, now okay. Yeah, proceed.
Good evening, Chairman sir. Thank you for this opportunity. C. Niranjan Rao garu is a commerce graduate. He has completed his post-graduation in LLM labor laws. And he also has a postgraduate diploma in industrial relations and personal management. He is a practicing advocate for the last 34 years. He has been practicing in the branches of labor and industrial laws, civil law, and criminal law. He has presented many matters before the High Court under the Consumer Protection Act and before the family courts. He has been elected as the president of AP Labor Law Practitioners Association. He is the associate legal member of the Employers Federation of Southern India. He is the co-chairman of HR and IR Committee of the Federation of Telangana Chamber of Commerce and Industries, Hyderabad. He is a member of Permanent Lok Adalat of local labor courts and industrial tribunals. He has conducted various seminars, workshops, webinars on labor laws on behalf of various organizations. He has published the following books, such as Recent Trends in Labor Laws, Latest Amendments and Notifications, Labor Laws, Applicability to Construction and Real Estate Industries, Important Labor Laws at a Glance, Safety and Security of Women at Workplace vis-a-vis Labor Laws, Important Labor Laws for IT and ITES at a Glance. He has a major clientele from Tata Teleservices Limited, Tata Consultancy Services, Tech Mahindra Limited, Genpact India Private Limited to Rainbow Hospitals, Apollo Hospitals, and many more. With these few words, I take this privilege to introduce the guest of today's guest speaker, C. Niranjan Rao garu, to the August Academy. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, CA Arunapriya. Now I request the speaker to take up the session, sir.
Yes. Good evening, all of you. It's a pleasure to associate with the learned chartered accountants who are very competent in solving many of the income tax issues, particularly people like us. Thank you for inviting me for your August gathering, sir. I'm highly obliged and honored to address the chartered accountants who are mainly practicing in various laws. One of the components is the labor laws. So I have picked up the topics which are only relevant for your day-to-day practice and administration, sir. That is relating to wages, bonus, gratuity, etc. There are in these labor codes, as the chairman sir is rightly pointed out, so many other issues are also there. But for the chartered accountants, that they may not be relevant. So only we are focusing in the given time on the issues which are relevant to the chartered accountants practice and which are required to understand in the day-to-day administration and practice. So, sir, this being the background, and now all of you are aware that many of the labor laws was passed pre-independence and post immediately after the independence. Suppose Trade Union Act is pre-independence, 1926. Payment of Wages Act is 1936. Similarly, Industrial Disputes Act is 1947. And the Gratuity Act is 72. Like that, very few enactments were there immediately after independence, and many of them are prior to independence. Even though 50 or 60 years have been passed, government has not focused anything much on the codification of the labor laws, nor they have made any serious thought how to liberalize it, how to remove the conflicts, and they have not even tried to solve the pending issues. Even though several conflicting court judgments are coming in, the governments are not seriously bothered about these issues, particularly because of the reason this is in the concurrent list. Some matters are being taken up by the state governments and some matters are being taken up by central government. So therefore, nobody has shown much interest in updating the labor laws. So in view of this, what is happening is, after the introduction of the global economy and then all the new MNCs are started coming in, the labor law has taken totally a new dimension. See, now the employees are not called an employee, they are called associates. They are given a new fancy names for them. And then many of them are working on a contract basis. So in the process, the Indian labor law has been totally violated. So what is the labor law situated here is not being followed by many of the companies because they simply copied and pasted from the US appointment orders, US contacts. All these things Google take up, download from Google and copy it and paste it. And then therefore they are doing it as an appointment letter or a contract. For an instance, non-solicitation is a clause which all the companies have started incorporating. Sir. After leaving the company, the employee cannot join with a competitor for 2 years, 3 years, like this, there are clauses. And then he cannot disclose the information what he has learned while working in this company. Also, there is a conditions they are putting in. All these are not governed by the Indian law. There is no provisions protecting the management from these kind of clauses. But this is the order of the day. Now, what I want to mention here is the government, in the anxiety of bringing up these 4 codes, combining all the books into one book, they have forgotten the existing practice and problems. As I mentioned, there is no non-solicitation clause is being mentioned even for a worker who does some manual work. For that worker also, the appointment order says you cannot join with a competitor, you cannot disclose any information. That kind of clause is now being incorporated for the worker category employees also. But unfortunately, in this codification, the government of India missed all the practical and burning issues, which are now relevant at this point of time. So without answering the practical issues which are required to meet the day-to-day administration as on date, they simply copied and pasted whatever all existing, except 5 or 6 major amendments. Nothing is new. Instead of carrying 30 books, we are carrying 4 books, all copy-pasted, added 5 clauses each code. That is what the government of India has done now. And in this process also, they have created a lot of confusion now. While doing a small exercise also, they created a lot of confusion and leading to litigation. That is the background of all these 4 codes, sir. And my personal and practical view is, this is not according to the present day requirement. This does not suit or does not answer the present issues. Some issues which are now existing in 1926 are still now being continued now. When the government want to totally revamp or totally come with the new concepts, they have not have continued the old outdated provisions, and they must have incorporated what are the requirements of the present day system. But unfortunately, that is not being done. All the provisions are still continuing, except with minor changes. Now, with this background, sir, even though 4 codes have been introduced in the parliament and the president has also given assent, but the reasons best known to the central government, they have not given the implementation date. The dates are not being implemented. Every 3 months, we are getting an information that it is being postponed for 3 months again. Now, the latest update is it is not going to be implemented in this financial year. Maybe it is only see the late of next financial year only. When it is not, they are not going to implement. What is the hurry the government have made to introduce these bills with a great amount of speed, which they will not do in general. They have introduced and passed it with a high speed, but later they simply kept it in the cold storage. So these are various other reasons for this also, maybe, but the government have better understanding about implementation dates. Now, for us, for today's topic, only 2 main codes are relevant, sir. One is Code on Wages and Social Security Code. These 2 codes covers ESI, PF, gratuity, bonus, and wages. Those are the 5 issues, in my opinion, are relevant for the present gathering. All Factories Act, what is the safety measures, what is the health measures to be taken, all those things are not relevant for this gathering. Therefore, the other code, we have not taken it. because there nothing deals with the chartered accountancy and others. So we are concentrating on the issues which are only required for the present day meeting, sir. Now I will start this presentation, sir. Is this screen is visible, sir?
Yes, sir, visible, sir, but you can maximize to some extent.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, sir. This is good, sir.
Yeah, coming, sir. Now it is okay, sir.
Yeah, now it's okay, sir. Perfect. Yeah.
So now, sir, as Chairman sir mentioned, there are 4 codes now, sir. One is Code on Wages, which is in 2019 itself. The other code is Industrial Relations Code 2020, Social Security Code 2020, and the other one is the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code 2020. Except 2019, all the 3 codes are in the year 2020, sir. So the wages code, they passed it in the 2019 itself, but they have not brought into implementation, sir. Now let us see what is the code on wages, sir. We will go on important things. Now this code is going to subsume the following acts. One is Payment of Wage Act 1936, Minimum Wage Act 1948, Payment of Bonus Act 1965, and Equal Remuneration Act 1976. As I mentioned it to you, sir, all these are it is almost 70 years old acts. Those 4 acts now are being totally going to be subsumed after this code came into existence. So now, application of this code. Now, generally, you must have seen in all the acts, this act will apply to the entire country except the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Like that, the introduction clauses used to be there for any act. Now, in this code, there is no such application of the act. It applies automatically to the entire India. Maybe the reason is they want to introduce the Jammu and Kashmir also. So therefore, they have not mentioned anything on this application. And also it applies to all the establishments, employees, unless exempted specifically in the provisions of the code. That means including the managers, now covered under this act code. And the coverage of the applications need to be interpreted from the definitions of the employee, employer, establishment, and other relevant definitions. Only after reading and interpreting the definitions only, we can understand how this code is made applicable to the different organizations. Because it is silent on how this code is applicable in the first clause itself. Sir, are they visible, sir? Everybody is able
Yes,
to.
sir. Visible, sir. Yeah. Clear, sir. Clear.
1 minute. So there are few definitions, sir, which are common in all the codes. One is wages, sir. This wages definition earlier is a definition different from ESI Act, EPF Act, ID Act, Gratuity Act, Bonus Act. Like that, there are different definitions for each enactment. Now, this code is bringing uniformity in the definition of wages. In all the codes, the wages definition is one. And the contract labor definition has been revised to include interstate migrant workers and part-time workers also. And now apprentices registered under the Apprentices Act 1961 are excluded from the definition of employee, and it is common across all the 3 other codes also. The important amendment which this code brought in, sir, in relation to an establishment having departments or branches in more than one state, as the case may be, the central government is the appropriate government, but no such provision in IR code. Except industrial relations code, sir, for all other codes, if any company having branches or departments in more than one state, then the central government will be the concerned appropriate government, but not the state governments. It is now a new introduction, sir. And now, sir, for the first time, compounding of offenses is also provided in the 4 codes. Earlier, this compounding is not there, sir. When there is a criminal case is filed against the management, they have to appear before the courts and pay fine or suffer the imprisonment. But now there is a provision is given to compound the offenses even after filing of the cases before the concerned courts. So this is a new welcome change by the government to avoid the criminal cases against the employers and management. So these are the common features in all the codes, sir. And we will see what are the important provisions now. As I mentioned it to you, this code is creating a lot of confusion than clarification. Now, for the instance, the definition of wages. Now, if you see this wages definition, it means all remuneration, whether by way of salaries, allowances, or otherwise expressed in terms of money, be payable to an employed person in respect of his employment and include basic pay, dearness allowance, and retaining allowance. Now, only 3 components will be there for the wages now, only basic, DA, and retaining allowance. This definition, if you look at the Provident Fund Act, this was the definition given under the Provident Fund Act that was borrowed and copied and pasted in this code as a definition of wages. But if they, without stopping there, they have added a few more clauses that going to create some kind of a confusion in future. Now, if you see this, what are the exclusions for the definition of wages? Any bonus payable under the law for time being in force, which does not form part of the remuneration payable under the terms of employment. B, value of house accommodation or supply of water, light, and etc. C is contribution paid by the employer to any pension or provident fund or the interest which may have accrued thereon. Any conveyance allowance or value of any traveling concession. Any sum paid to employ person to defray special expenses entitled on him by the nature of the employment. House rent allowance. This is the important, sir. F is important. Earlier, house rent allowance is also included in the definition of wages. Now they have excluded HRA. Remuneration payable under any award or settlement between the parties or order of a court or a tribunal, any overtime allowance or any commission payable to an employee. This A to I is I underlined it for the easy identification. And now the J and K is gratuity and retrenchment compensation in any way is not an issue. Now the next class is important for us to understand. Provided that for calculating the wages under this class, if the payments made by the employer to the employee under subsection A to I exceeds 1/2 or such other percentage as may be notified by the central government, all this at remuneration calculated under this class. So if any clause A to I, that's why I marked it here. Starting from A to I, if these clauses, these amounts exceeds 50%, then this exceeded 50% will also add it to the wages. Then the ESI contributions, his PF contributions, his gratuity. Sir, so the contributions will also go up because of this amendment. So this is A to I will include it if the 50% is more, and then it also attracts PF, ESI, and all other statutory payments. And now the amount which exceeds one such half or so percent, so notified shall be deemed as a remuneration and shall be accordingly added in wages under this class. This is one which is going to create a lot of problems in future. For example, I will say this, kindly look at I. Any commission payable to an employee. If, for instance, take for this luxury car, a Benz or a BMW, if a sales agent sells some a BMW car, he will collect the commission of a handsome commission of suppose a 1 lakh on the sale of a car. So that 1 lakh will also be added to his salary now. So that way, this month he may go up, next month he will come down, and his PF and ESI will go up, and bonus and gratuity will also to be calculated in this manner. So therefore, this creates a lot of confusion, and unnecessary issues will be attracted because of this amendment to the existing definition of wages. Now, unfortunately, this is the wages for all the 4 codes. This is the definition applies to PF, ESI, gratuity, bonus, minimum wages, payment of wages. Everything is now governed by this definition of wages. So this is one thing which needs to be relooked into, and the government is also came to know about the implications because of this definition, and somebody is saying that there is a second thought of amending these clauses. Let us see what happens in future. Now, for the purpose of easy understanding, I have made a small components which included in the wages only 3: basic, dearness, and retaining valence. Excluded components are HRA, conveyance, remuneration under the award or settlement, gratuity, and bonus. So these are the left side of the included, right side of the excluded components. And if the included components is less than 50%, then the 50% of gross is to be considered wages. Now, suppose for in a company, as on date, if basic and DA and retaining allowance is about 35% or 40%, they have to increase it to 50% now. That is the now further liability or the additional liability on the companies. Now they have to increase the basic and DA. Retaining allowance is mostly not available in many of the companies. It will be paid only by the seasonal factories, such as sugar, tobacco, and all those companies used to pay retaining allowance. But nowadays, most of the even sugar companies have also withdrawn paying this retaining allowance. And what is normally payable in many of the companies are basic and DA. Now, if basic and DA is suppose less than 50%, now it has to be increased to 50%. Now there is a standard applicability of the definition of wages that 50% can be your basic and DA and 50% can be your other allowances. Whereas earlier, some companies are 40%, 60% are allowances, 30%, 70% like that. There was no uniformity. Now they brought it 50% should be your basic and DA. On that, you have to pay PF, ESI, gratuity, bonus, leave encashment, etc. Taking the salary of an employee is minimum 50%. So this is a new amendment which is going to be come into force for all the companies and all the enactments. Am I clear, sir? Any clarification is required on this?
Yes, sir. Any queries will be dealt at the end of the session, sir. As if you wish to in the middle also, we can ask the members to raise.
Yeah. If they had anything, please ask them to raise the issue immediately, sir.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So similarly, sir, the definition of worker is also slightly enlarged now. Now the worker definition, this is common in all the 4 codes, sir. Worker means any person employed in an industry to do any manual, unskilled, skilled, technical, operational, clerical or supervisor work for hire or reward, whether or not the terms of employment be express or implied, and includes now working journalists and sales promotion employees are also brought under the definition of a worker. This is only to give more benefits and more protection under the acts. Now they have included this working journalists and sales promotion also in the category of worker. But they does not include who is employed mainly in a managerial or administrative capacity, or who is employed in a supervisory capacity drawing wages exceeding 15,000 rupees per month, or amount which may be notified by the central government from time to time. So this, the earlier it is 10,000, now it is made 15,000. So other portion of the definition of wages, except including working journalists and sales promotion, almost the earlier definition was still continuing, sir. The code excludes the apprentices engaged in the Apprentice Act 1961. However, it is unclear whether the trainees under the NEEM scheme on standing orders are covered under the code or not. There is no clarity on this. if a trainee is engaged on the Standing Orders Act, whether they considered as a worker or not, is again a dispute which is to be resolved in the future. There is no clarity on this point. Similarly, now a definition of employee is included, which was not there earlier. Earlier is only worker. Now an employee definition is also introduced, which reads as any person other than an apprentice engaged on the Apprentices Act, employed on wages by an establishment to do any skilled, semi-skilled or unskilled manual, operational, supervisory, managerial, administrative, technical or clerical work for hire or reward, whether terms of employment be expressed or implied. Now, as I put it in red color, supervisory, managerial, administrative, technical persons are now covered under the definition of an employee, but not as a worker. As an employee, they are covered. So therefore, every manager is also getting some protection under this code. Earlier, which is not there, a supervisor, a manager are not covered under the Industrial Disputes Act. Therefore, they have to go to the civil court in case they have any grievance. But now they are also brought under the definition of an employee. So they are also given some kind of a protection under this code. It also includes a person declared to be an employee by the appropriate government, but does not include any member of the armed forces. So now every person is covered either as an employee or as a worker, except the persons from the armed forces. Everybody is now some way or other brought under the coverage of this code. Everybody is now given protection. Because the definition used is managerial, the directors are also now entitled for some kind of a protection under this code, which was not there earlier. Now, the definition of a contract labor is also underwent a small change in all the codes, and now because of this, a contract labor means a worker who shall be deemed to be employed in or in connection with the work of an establishment when he is hired in or in connection with such work by or through a contractor with or without the knowledge of a principal employer, and includes an interstate migrant worker. You must have observed in all these definitions, the inclusion of interstate migrant worker, which is absent in the earlier years, now they have consciously including the interstate migrant worker because of the last year Corona time, when we have seen many interstate migrant workers walking miles and miles to go back to their homes without any protection. So keeping in mind of their financial difficulties and having no protection under the act, they have included the interstate migrant wherever it is possible. Now, if you engage a worker from Bihar or a UP or Orissa, he will be an interstate migrant worker and he is covered as a contract labor. Earlier, they are only covered under the Interstate Migrant Workers Act that have a little application, and many of the managements have not followed that act. So therefore, to protect these interstate migrant workmen, they have included in the definition of a contract labor. Therefore, they have given a lot of protection and social security benefits also. But it does not include a worker other than a part-time employee who is regularly employed by a contractor for any activity of his establishment, and his employment is governed by mutually accepted standards of conditions of employment, including engagement on permanent basis, and gets a periodical increment in the pay, social security coverage, and other welfare benefits in accordance with the law for time being in force in such employment. So these are the new definitions or new amendments to the existing Contract Labor Act, which now excludes the many of the employees, includes the interstate migrant workers, but excludes if a person is regularly employed by a contractor, he cannot be a contract labor now. And similarly, if the ESI, PF and social security benefits is given, such person will also is not a contract worker. Now, if he is not a contract worker, the ultimate choice will be the employee of the company or an organization. So this is also an issue. How can the contract labor can be taken on the roles of the company is yet to be seen. How this government will come out with the rules on this aspect. So this is one issue which is going to create some kind of a problem in future. So the minimum wages is also now underwent a small amendment, which says no employer shall pay to any employee wages less than the minimum rate of wages fixed by the appropriate government. Sometimes the appropriate government for them, some companies is state, and for some of the industries, if it is central government. So whatever minimum wages is fixed by the appropriate government, no employer can pay less than that. For the purpose of fixation of minimum rate of wages under this section, the appropriate government shall primarily take into account the skill of workers required for working under the categories of unskilled, skilled, semi-skilled, or highly skilled, or geographical area, or both. So these kind of considerations were not there earlier, sir. The government used to take there used to be a committee, and that committee will fix the wages that is to be finalized. Now the minimum, while fixing the minimum wages, the skill of the workers are also a consideration to determine the minimum wages. So that is a good sign from the government side. In addition to such minimum rate of wages, for certain category of workers, take into account their arduousness of work, like temperature or humidity, normally difficult to bear, hazardous occupations or processes, or underground work, as may be prescribed by that government. So considering these factors, the minimum wages has to be fixed by the appropriate government, not as per their choice. Earlier, now what this is, there will be advisory committees and some persons who are no way connected with the industry are appointed as committee members. They are deciding something. So now that is going to be curtailed, and the minimum wages has to be fixed basing on the skill of the workers, basing on the area they are working, geographical area, and depending upon the nature of work they are doing, the minimum wages has to be fixed now. This is a good sign from the government side. And the floor wage, which is the first time this language is also came into force, floor wage to be decided by the central government. The central government shall fix floor wage taking into minimum wages of such worker in such manner as may be prescribed, provided that the different floor wages may be fixed for different geographical areas. The minimum rates of wages fixed by the appropriate government under section 6 shall not be less than the floor wage, and if the minimum rates of wages fixed by the appropriate government earlier is more than the floor wage, then this appropriate government shall not reduce the such minimum rates of wages fixed by it earlier. The central government may, before fixing the floor wage, obtain the advice of the Central Advisory Board and consult the state government in such manner as may be prescribed. So in this, sir, fixing the floor wage, if already some wages are being fixed and existing, that cannot be reduced even after the introduction of the floor wage by the central government. And the central government, while fixing the minimum wages, shall consult all the state governments how to fix this floor wage. It cannot be unilaterally done by the central government. It is only with the consultation of all the state governments, the floor wage has to be finalized by the central government. This is also a one new concept which has been brought into the schools. So shall I stop for any questions, sir? Hello?
Hello.
Sir, shall I stop for any questions?
Sir, you can continue, sir.
And only to give them some kind of a breathing. So if any person have any question, kindly raise the issue, sir. We will answer that.
Sir, is the same definition for this pension also?
Pension is different, sir. It is only wages.
Okay.
Pension is to be divided in the Provident Fund Act only. That only deals with the length of service and the savings so far done by that employee. Basing on that, the pension will be calculated, sir. It is how the wages has to be prescribed is now the issue, sir. Monthly wages.
Okay.
This issue is only about that, sir. So I have just given a kind of a small example, sir, illustrative. Now minimum wages and dearness allowance, suppose 12,000, sir, existing one. Now as per the Minimum Wage Act, earlier, before the commencement of the code, you can pay the 12,000 in under 3 components: basic wages, dearness allowance, and HRA. Total 12,000 you can pay as prescribed by the government under 3 heads. Now, because of the code of wages on the right side, the HRA has been removed and you have to pay dearness, basic wages and dearness allowance only. And the total 12,000 has to be paid only under 2 heads, but not under the 3 heads, because HRA is excluded from the definition of the wages. So these are the different minimum wage act earlier on the left side, and the code of wages, which is now introduced, is on the right side. This is the comparison. Only basic and DA has to be taken into consideration for purpose of arriving the minimum wages under this code, not HRA or any other allowances. So this is the difficulty again, sir, for as a chartered accountants, these are the relevant portion for you. Time limit is also prescribed for payment of wages. The employer shall pay or cause to be paid wages to the employees engaged on the daily basis at the end of the shift. For the weekly basis employees at the last working day of the week, that is to say before the weekly holiday, and for fortnightly paid employees before the end of second day after the end of the fortnight. This is some kind of a stupidity they have introduced, sir. For daily wage workers at the end of each shift, suppose a person came in the morning shift, going around 2 o'clock, the wages has to be paid at 2 o'clock, and somebody goes at midnight. For him, it is to be paid at the midnight. How can it be practically possible to pay this kind of wages on daily basis? Is a disastrous amendment. Now, for the monthly base paid employees before the expiry of 7th day of succeeding month. Now that is also okay. Where an employee has been removed or dismissed from service, or retrenched or has resigned from service, or become unemployed due to the closure of the establishment, the wages payable to him shall be paid within 2 working days of his removal, dismissal, retrenchment, as the case may be his resignation. So the full and final settlement has to be done within 2 days after his leaving the services. Suppose the employee has to surrender some properties to the company, a laptop, some kind of a data cards, mobile phones, everything is being given by the company. And unless it is returned to the company, his final settlement cannot be done. Now that suppose the employee has taken much time, if it cannot be settled within the 2 days from his date of his removal. So this is also a kind of a difficulty which we are going to face, because within 2 days settling his accounts, practically it is very difficult for many companies. So this is an issue which may create some kind of problem in future. So bonus, this is also a relevant issue for all of you. So how the manner and calculating the bonus, everything what earlier was there was retained, sir. Maximum bonus 20%, minimum bonus 8.33, time limit is 8 months. All these things are simply retained. There is no change. Even though the bonus calculation minimum and maximum bonus are retained, and other provisions are also maximum retained. But the guiding schedules for computation of gross profit, there is first schedule and second schedule. Sums deductible from the gross profit, that third schedule, and set on and set off, that is fourth schedule, have been dropped. Now in this code, the schedules are dropped, but the rules are framed on this aspect. They are coming out from some rules, how to calculate this, and in the absence of schedules, they are framing these rules. And the power to prescribe guidelines now rests with this central government. Earlier, because it is in the concurrent list, sometimes the state governments are also used to make rules. Now they have totally removed the powers of the state government, and now power to prescribe any guidelines under this code is only with the central government, but no state government has got any power or authority to interfere in any manner with relating to the provisions of this code. So it is only the central government has to do anything. Now the fines. Fine is also going to create some kind of a confusion hereafter, which was earlier not there. No fine shall be imposed on any employee, save in respect of those acts on his part as an employer, with the previous approval of the appropriate government or such authority as may be prescribed. Important thing is, no fine shall be imposed on any employee until such employee has been given an opportunity of showing cause against the fine or otherwise than in accordance with such procedure as may be prescribed for the imposition of fine. That means we have to give a show cause notice or some kind of a memo before imposing a fine. the total amount of fine which may be imposed on any one wage period on any employee shall not exceed an amount equal to 3% of the wages payable to him in respect of that wage period. So whatever the loss or damage caused to the company, only 3% of the wages payable to him in that particular month can be taken as a fine, not more than that. But interestingly, no fine be imposed on any employee shall be recovered from him by installment or after the expiry of 90 days from the date on which it was imposed. Suppose it is 6 months later, we cannot impose a fine on him. Within 3 months only, that is to be recovered by way of installment, not one stroke. It is to be maximum is 3%, and also it should be recovered by way of installment. We cannot take any action after the expiry of 90 days. So that is the new conditions imposed on the management while imposing the fines also. There is many restrictions now on the management to impose a fine. So next one is the authorities can ask for more details. Even the trade unions can ask for more details. Under the Payment of Bonus Act, when an application is made to the authority or tribunal or arbitrator, as the case may be, by any trade union being a party to the dispute, or the case may be an appeal. And when there is no trade union by the employees being a party to the dispute, requiring any clarification relating to any item in the balance sheet or the profit and loss account, then such authority or the appellate authority, tribunal or arbitrator may, after satisfying itself, issue such clarification if necessary. And by order, direct the employer or the company to furnish to the trade union or the employees of such clarification within such time as may be specified in the direction, and the employer or the company shall comply with such a direction. It is going to be disastrous, according to me. Earlier, as all of you are aware, under section 23 of the Bonus Act, there was a presumption that the balance sheets audited by an auditor is presumed to be correct. So nobody can question the calculations or the contents of the balance sheet once it is audited and approved by the auditors. Now, there is a clause, a trade union can ask for any item in the balance sheet clarification, or in the profit and loss account, how this is going booked. And if it's such kind of clarification is asked, kindly see the last line of this slide, which says that the company shall comply with such a direction. So as a chartered accountants, you may have to give more details whenever it is asked by a trade union leader, that why this kind of a item is booked, why this balance sheet is showing like this, why the profit and loss account is showing like this. So this is a new weapon in the hands of trade union leaders to threaten the management, saying that your balance sheet is bad and the profit and loss account are not properly accounted. So all these kind of allegations can be made, and an opportunity is given to the workers to create some kind of an unrest against the management. So this is one an important amendment relating to the chartered accountants, where they are now required to give more answers if they are asked relating to balance sheet or profit and loss account. That is one important amendment. Now the offenses and penalties are slightly increased. Unlike the other existing acts, now it is heavily increased and the penalties are severe. No court shall take cognizance on any offense punishable under this code, except on a complaint made by or under the authority of an appropriate government or an officer authorized in this behalf, or by an employee or a trade union registered under the Union Act, or an inspector cum facilitator. Kindly read the highlighted portion in red color. An employee or a registered trade union leader can raise a dispute against the management under this code. Earlier, it is not possible for an employee to make a complaint against the management or to a registered trade union leader. Now this is given, they are given such power. The inspector cum facilitator shall, before initiation of prosecution proceeding for the offences under the clause, shall give an opportunity to the employer to comply with the provisions of the code by way of a written direction, which shall lay down a time period for such compliance, And if the complaint lodged by a worker or a trade union, no such opportunity to be given to the management. And if the employer complies, the inspector cum facilitator shall not initiate such prosecution proceedings. So except for a worker or a trade union leader, if a notice is given by a labor department or a inspector, opportunity will be given to the management to reply to that show cause notice. And then if they are complying with the provisions, then no action will be taken against that notice. But whereas when in case of a worker or a trade union leader, no such opportunity need to be given and they can directly file a case against the management. This is one dangerous weapon in the hands of the trade union leaders. And the compounding of offense, as I mentioned it to you, is the first time introduced in these courts. It is common in all the courts. Some offenses can be compounded, not all, many of them. Every officer shall exercise the power to compound an offense subject to the direction, control, and the supervision of the appropriate government. And every application for compounding of an offense shall be made in such manner as may prescribe. And the offenses can be compounded before the institution of any prosecution. Where the composition of offense is made after the institution of any prosecution, such proposition shall be brought to the notice of the court. And on such notice, the composition, the offense being given, the person against whom the offense is so compound shall be discharged. Now, only one thing is, after filing of a criminal case in the court also, the cases can be compounded and the court can close the case as if the person is not committed any offense. So compounding can be done either before filing of a case or after filing of the case also, but the management will be given a clean sheet if the compounding is accepted. So this is not there earlier. Employers and management representatives has to appear before the court and they have to face the trial, and ultimately if they are convicted, they have to sentence it to jail also. So that is now given some kind of a breathing for the employers to compound the cases. And because of this, there is a misuse of power provisions going to happen in many of the areas. The powers of the inspector are now conferred on the employees and the registered trade unions. They are becoming now act like a labor commissioner. In view of this provision, any employee or any trade union can file a complaint before the court for prosecuting the employer. It is not confined to one segment of the employees who are drawing wages below 24,000. So because the managers and supervisors are also brought under the purview of this court, any person can lodge a complaint against the management if there is any kind of differences between the management and that particular employee. He can simply file a case against the management or even prosecute the management. That is the difficulty now. Any employee or worker can prosecute the employer, which is not the procedure existing now. That is going to create a lot of difficulty for the management. Prosecuting the employer, filing a small case or a claim can be defended. But if a criminal case is filed against the managing director or a chairman or some senior management, it is difficult for them to appear before the court, and they have to surrender sometimes to the pressure of these employees or trade union leaders, and then they can take undue advantage of the situation. That is a difficulty because of misuse of powers going to happen by the trade union leaders and the employees. And if you concludingly, we can see after reading all these clauses, whether this code is going to create any kind of an advantage either for the employers or the employees. And if you see this codification of labor laws does make a huge promises, but fails to secure their realization. This is not what is required for the present day circumstances. It makes huge promises, but fails to secure their realization. And then fails to incorporate long pending demands of workers and management, and also does not broaden the frontier of rights, and it also dismantles the long established institutions. That is the pity of it. Now the labor courts are going to be removed. Only the industrial tribunals are going to function with the 2 members. So which is now met with the long 50-60 years, the labor court had discharged its duties excellently well. But now that is going to be demolished. The labor codes are not going to be there after the introduction of these codes. Now the long established institutions are going to die because of this. And the wages definition runs into 49 lines, which is creating more confusion. As I mentioned it to you in my earlier slides, it includes some 15 and it excludes some 15. And thereafter, there is another provision which says 50% or more to be included. So this runs into 49 lines. Is it required in the present day circumstances to write a definition with 49 lines? And for whose benefit this kind of definitions are being drafted? That is all a kind of a definition which does not create any confidence. And the worker definition runs into 23 lines. In this process, to introduce the provisions, it has diluted existing labor laws, which was time tested, which are now in existence for last 50 years. Now they are going to be diluted because of this introduction of codes. It has neither legal steadiness nor a social vision. If the passage of Code 2019 is any indication, then it does not inspire much confidence about the remaining codes. As I mentioned it in the beginning itself, it is not to suit the present day requirements, and it is not inspiring any confidence for the entrepreneurs or the persons who comes from investment within India. It is not going to inspire much confidence because it is not a new version. It is a old wine in old bottle. So therefore, all these codes are of not much use for the present day circumstances. And I will also tell you some flip side of this. On the flip side, most of the substantial provisions of those laws continues to exist under the Code of Wages. To that extent, the exercise may be viewed largely as a consolidation of laws rather than a truly a reform. It is a consolidation. Earlier, we are carrying about 29 books. Now we have to carry 4 books. That's all. It's a consolidation of laws. It is not a reform. Nothing newly introduced, nothing newly brought into the existence which require the present day circumstances. It is only cannot be called as a reform. For example, the Code of Wages apply consistently all kinds of establishments, small sized, medium sized, and large sized. Suppose wages. A person working in Hyderabad, a person working in Vijayanagaram or somewhere, for instance, in Telangana, some remote place. For both of them, the law is the same. The person doing the business at Hyderabad and a person doing it some other place in a remote place or village may not have some kind of business, same kind of business, but the law is the same. There is no distinction between both of them. So therefore, it can be difficult for the small time employers to comply with these kind of provisions. And the definition of wages be further simplified to reduce or hopefully eliminate any litigation surrounding the complex definition. And now, as I mentioned it to you, whether retaining elements necessary in the context of present day wage systems. Suppose take for an instance of a hotel or a mall or a software company. No other company is paying retaining elements. How can they introduce in the present day also to be a retaining elements as a part of the wages? Nobody is paying retaining elements. So how can the government can introduce this kind of an elements which is not at all in existence in many of the major companies? So that is one bad luck which the government have failed to consider. Now, should the women workmen still face the discrimination, including factors such as age, marital status, etc.? No separate protection is given to the women workers except allowing them to work in the night shift. But all the other discriminations which are existing earlier are still continuing in spite of this codes are brought in. Simply creating one law by merging 4 labor laws and reducing compliances is unlikely to address the larger problems. So it is not going to address many of the practical problems faced by either by the employees or by the management. And it is simply merging of books, nothing more than that. That is the flip side of it. Now I have taken you to the Code on Wages. Its new definitions, its interpretations, and its flip side in its conclusion. What is the main important amendments required for the chartered accountants that has been now considered. Now the other portion is PF, ESI, gratuity, and all these things are covered by Social Security Code. Now we are going to the second phase of this webinar, where we are touching the other aspects relating to our subject. On the first portion, do any person has any queries, sir?
Members, you can unmute yourself and you can raise queries to the speaker. He will clarify your doubts.
Yeah, please.
Or else you can put it in the chat box, your query.
Yeah, anything is okay, sir. There is 2 charts appears to be on the chat box, sir.
No, they are general, no, sir. Nothing
Okay.
related to the query or subject.
Right. Then okay. So shall we?
Members, any queries from your side, members? Sir, I think as of now, nothing. So
Okay.
you can proceed with the second
Okay.
code. Okay.
Right, sir. It is the Social Security Code 2020, sir. Now, the definition of Social Security is usually understood as some form of monetary benefit given by the government, and it provides to those who are incapable of being employed or inadequately employed. That is the generally in European and American countries, this is the Social Security. When a person is sick or a person is aged, when or other person is incapable of employed, for them the government will provide some kind of a monetary benefits. So, but in the Indian context, the Social Security has a different meaning altogether. The European and American countries' Social Security is not here. It's a different meaning. In India, our Social Security has spanned over multiplicity of labor laws that state and central government have implemented over the course of many years, like ESI, PF, maternity benefit, gratuity, workman compensation. All these things are Social Security legislations to protect the employees. Many state governments have yet to frame the rules under these codes. Even though the central government have passed the act, but the states are reluctant to make any rules under these codes. Therefore, this is the main reason for the delay in implementing these codes. So state governments are not showing any interest to bring these codes into force in their particular states. And these are the acts that are going to be subsumed or repealed after the introduction of this Social Security Code. The first act is Employees Compensation Act, Employees State Insurance Act, Employees Provident Fund and Miscellaneous Provisions Act, the Employment Exchanges Compulsory Notification Act, Maternity Benefit Act, Payment of Gratuity Act, the Cine Workers Welfare Fund Act, the Building and Other Workers, Construction Workers Welfare Cess Act, and Unorganized Workers Social Security Act. These are the 9 acts going to be repealed after this code come into force. And what is Social Security as per this code? This code is defining what is exactly the Social Security. It means measures of protection afforded to the employees, unorganized workers, gig workers, and platform workers to ensure access to healthcare, provide income security, and in case of any old age, unemployment, sickness, invalidity, work injury, maternity, or loss of breadwinner by means of rights conferred on them and schemes framed here under this code. To protect all these people, the Social Security has been defined. They have rather combined all the definitions earlier in the various acts. Now they made it into a single definition which deals with the Social Security. So these are the Social Security benefits to be given to the unorganized workers, gig workers, and platform workers. These are the new category of workers whom, for the first time, some kind of a protection is given under the Social Security Code. Now, if we look at it, there are no changes in the Employees Compensation Act 1920. All the act is simply copied and pasted. And Building and Other Construction Workers Welfare Cess Act, 1% cess has to be paid. That is totally copied and pasted. And the Unorganized Workers Social Security Act, totally copied and pasted. There are no changes in these 3 acts. The Cine Workers Welfare Fund Act is totally repealed. There is no provision now. In other acts, there are small changes. For the purpose of counting employees for the coverage on an establishment under the EPF and ES Acts, the employees whose wage more than the wage ceiling shall also be taken into account. This is one new addition in ESI and EPF Acts. Irrespective of their wage ceiling, everybody will be taken into account for the purpose of coverage. We need not pay contributions, but for purpose of coverage, the excluded employees will also be taken into consideration to count 20 or 10 to applicable the act are made applicable. So these are the main changes in this code. And these are the major inclusions. First time a major inclusions have been done in this 4 category of workers. This code mandates the central government and state government to make social security scheme for home-based worker. The first time a name by name home-based worker is introduced, who provide services from their homes or any premises other than the workplace of their employees. Because the work from home is now a new concept has been come. So to protect them, they have introduced this home-based workers. Similarly, self-employed workers who are not employed by an employer, but engaged in any occupation in the unorganized sector, subject to monthly earning or hold cultivable land. So this is a kind of a protection to the leaseholders of agriculture land and kind of construction activity where in an unorganized sector, the mestris and other persons who are self-employed workers, for them also a protection is given under this head. And wage workers who are employed in an unorganized sector directly by an employer or through any contractor, and includes a temporary or casual workers, migrant workers, or workers employed by households, including domestic workers. Now your housemaids and house servants are also considered as wage workers. They are entitled to the social security benefits. And next one is a gig worker. Gig worker means who are outside the traditional employer-employee relationship, such as freelancers. And now you can see this Ola drivers, Swiggy employees, Zomato employees, all these kind of people who are outside the traditional employer-employee relationship, they are covered as gig workers. And lastly, a new coined is platform workers, who access other organizations or individuals using online platforms and earn money by providing them with specific services. These are all mostly related to e-commerce and then internet connected services. Those people are covered as platform workers. Now, if you see these kind of 5 new kind of employees were brought under the coverage for the purpose of social security benefits only. They are not covered under any other code. To get the ESI, PF, bonus, gratuity, and all those things, these kind of 5 types of workers are now entitled. And now there are 2 important additions we can find which are not there earlier. First one is an aggregator. Aggregator means a digital intermediary or a marketplace for a buyer or user of a service to connect with the seller or service provider. These are all like Amazon and Flipkart. All these people are a marketplace where a buyer and seller are available, and through him, these services will be provided. It's a kind of a service provider and is called as aggregator. And now earlier employment exchanges are now differently named as career centers. Instead of employment exchanges, now there will be a career center. Career center means an office including employment exchange, place, or a portal established and maintained in the manner prescribed by the central government for providing such career services, including registration, collection, furnishing of information, either by keeping of registers or otherwise manually, digitally, virtually, or through any other mode, as may be prescribed by the central government, which may relate to generally or specifical to person who seek to employ employees, person who seek an employment, occurrence of vacancies and the persons who seek vocational guidance and career counseling or guidance to start self-employment. Now, these are earlier employment exchanges are now differently named, and an option is given to the management also. They can inform the career center that they want so and so people, and the career center will pick up and then provide them the employment through this career center. So the earlier employment exchanges are now work as a career center. Now, sir, from the Provident Fund Act, now these are relevant and important for the chartered accountants' perspective. A limitation period is also being introduced under the PF Act. In respect of a dispute arising under the Employees Provident Fund and the Employee State Insurance Corporation, no proceedings can be initiated after the expiry of period of 5 years from the date on which the dispute is alleged to have arisen or the alleged due from an employer. Under ESI Act, that 5-year limitation is already been introduced. But now under the PF Act also, same kind of provision has been introduced, which says a limitation of 5 years. The department cannot ask any claim beyond the preceding 5 years. So this kind of a limitation is first time introduced under the PF Act, not under the ESI. ESI is already there. An appeal may be preferred to the tribunal within 60 days on deposit of 25% of the amount determined with the concerned social security organization. Here, existingly, it is 75%, but the tribunal has got the power to waive or reduce by giving the reasons of making any deposit. Total deposit waiver can also be given. But now that discretionary power has been removed to the tribunal, and now mandatorily 25% has to the amount have to be deposited, not with the PF department or with the tribunal. It is to be deposited with the social security organization, which is now going to be constituted under this code. So if you win or lose, 25% has to be deposited under the social security organization. This is one difficulty after this introduction of this code, because in PF matters, the amounts running into crores. Suppose 100 crores, an order is passed by the PF department. If we want to challenge this, we have to deposit 25 crores upfront. Then only our appeal will be entertained. Unfortunately, the court have no power to reduce that deposit amount, because that clause which is earlier existing has been removed now in this code. So mandatorily 25% is the amount to be deposited with the social security organization. And certain other provisions are also deleted under this. Provision to review the order of assessment. Earlier under section 7B, the power is given to assess the orders. That power is being removed. And the power to claim escaped amount is also been removed. Power of the tribunal to waive the deposit amount, as I mentioned, is been removed. Schedule of applicable establishments has been also been removed. Now, the PF Act, wherever 20 or more employees are employed, it applies uniformly for everybody. Earlier, there are scheduled, only to that scheduled employments, the PF Act was made applicable. Now there are no schedules. 20 employees, it is covered, that's all. Now that is some important provisions which are deleted from the existing PF Act. And the liberty is also given to maintain the Provident Fund accounts to the employers. The central government may, by an application made to it on this behalf by the employer and majority of the employees in relation to an establishment employing 100 or more persons, authorize the employer by an order in writing to maintain a Provident Fund account in relation to the establishment. So the central government may give permission to have your own Provident Fund account, where 100 or more workers are agreed. In such manner as may be prescribed by the central government and subject to such terms and conditions as may be specified, provided that no authorization shall be made under this subsection if the employer of such establishments has committed any default in the payment of Provident Fund contribution or committed any other offence under this code during the 3 years immediately preceding the date of such authorization. So with these two riders, central government may give permission to the employers or managements to have their own independent provident fund account, but it cannot be given if it is a defaulter. So except that, now that means the government is slowly wants to give away the provident fund maintenance from this central government purview. It is also going to in the hands of a private managements, slowly one after the other. So this is one indication that the government is giving permission to the managements to maintain on their own. They don't want to come in their way. So under the ESI Act also, sir, some 2-3 dangerous amendments were brought in, which are necessary to be informed to all of you. The central government may frame a scheme for unorganized workers, gig workers, and platform workers and members of their families. They have to frame a scheme. Establishments working in hazardous sectors to be mandatorily covered even if one employee is engaged. So for one employee also ESI has to be paid in hazardous sectors. Option is given to employers to become members even with less than 10 workers. That is one thing. Now, corporation right to recover. This is a dangerous proposition in favor of the ESI corporation. If the employer fails to register or fails to pay contribution within the time, and the corporation pays any benefits to the employees, it can recover from the employer after providing due opportunity the capitalized value of the benefit paid to the employee. But it can be adjusted against the payment of contribution and interest or damages. The said amount can be recovered as an arrears of land revenue. So in case the company or an employer fails to register or fails to pay contribution within the 15 days, and because of that ESI corporation has forced to suffer any loss, that loss can be recovered from the employer because they have not registered within the time nor paid the contributions within the time. That liability can be recovered from the employers. That is one new addition now. And another addition is recovery of excessive sickness benefit. This is also a new proposition which has been introduced, where the corporation considered that the incidence of sickness among the insured person is excessive by reason of insanitary working conditions in a factory or other establishment, or the neglect of the owner or occupier of the factory or other establishments to observe any health regulations enjoined on him by or under any enactment for the time being in force, or insanitary conditions in any tenements or lodgings occupied by the insured persons, and such insanitary conditions are attributable to the neglect of the worker, owner of the dispensary. So it all says, in case of any sickness benefit is made to be paid by ESI corporation because of the insanitary working conditions or non-maintenance of sanitary conditions in the factory or an establishment, such excessive benefit can be recovered from the management. Suppose a person fell sick because of insanitary conditions. That excess amount which the ESI corporation has suffered can be recovered from the employer. So this is a new power given to the ESI corporation to recover the amounts from the employers if they are not providing sufficient sanitary conditions. And it is a power is also given to the government to refer for an inquiry, and it may appoint a competent person or persons to hold an inquiry to decide whether the sanitary conditions are existing in that company or an establishment or not. And that committee will decide, and depending upon that, the sickness benefit will be given to the employees. This is one new concept they have introduced. And now for the gig workers and unorganized workers and platform workers, there is a scheme now being introduced under this act, and the central government may by notification frame scheme for the unorganized workers, gig workers and platform workers and the members of their families for providing benefits admissible under the chapter by the corporation. So that means ESI corporation has to come frame a scheme to protect these kind of workers and their families also. There is a new concept. And the contribution, user charges, scale of benefits, qualifying and eligibility conditions and other terms and conditions subject to which the scheme may be operated shall be such as may be specified in the scheme. Now this scheme is coming out, how to give the benefits to all these employees and their families, and accordingly the charges will also be determined and the benefits will also be quantified as per this scheme which is now going to be introduced. And in the gratuity, sir, most of the earlier provisions are retained, and only for the fixed time employees, it is to be paid on termination of his contract. For 1 year also, if an employee was engaged on fixed term basis, for that 1 year also, gratuity has to be paid. So that is a new introduction. All other earlier existing provisions under the gratuity, that is to be paid on continuous working of 5 years, that is still there. But in the case of working journalists, as defined in clause F of section 2 of Working Journalists and Other Newspaper Employees Act, the expression 5 years occurring in the subsection shall be deemed to 3 years. Only for working journalists, the gratuity has to be payable after 3 years. They need not work for 5 years. As all you know, journalists are most favorite persons for the government, and therefore they are given more benefits than the other employees. So only by working for 3 years, they are entitled to the gratuity. Whereas a worker working in a factory has to continuously work for 5 years to get a gratuity. So this is only one amendment in the Gratuity Act. There is no changes in other provisions of the Gratuity Act. Now you can also see the maintenance of records and registers by the managements. An employer of an establishment shall maintain records, registers in the form prescribed by the appropriate government, electronically or otherwise, containing such particulars and details with regard to persons employed, muster roll, wages, such other particulars and details in such manner as may be prescribed by the appropriate government. So maintenance of the records has not been taken away. Despite of this code and despite of so much of relaxations, every employer has to maintain records. There is no option. And still he has to display notices at the workplaces of the employees in such manner and the form as may be prescribed by the appropriate government. So notices has to be displayed. And issue of wage slips to the employees in electronic form or otherwise. So wage slips has to be issued. And file such returns electronically or otherwise to such officer or authority in such manner and during such period as prescribed by the appropriate. So now if you see, I have mentioned it in the red color in the beginning of every sentence. It says you have to maintain records, you have to display notices, you have to issue wage slips and file such returns. So all the earlier existing provisions regarding to the filing and maintenance of records are still continue without any much deviation. Only option now is given, you can submit it electronically. You need not physically go and submit in their office. You can send it by email or any other mode also in electronic way. So that is only a relaxation, but all other things still continue to be in operation. So some provisions have been introduced for the unorganized workers and gig workers. And every unorganized gig worker or a platform worker shall be required to register subject to fulfillment of the following conditions. Namely, he has completed 16 years of age or such age as may be prescribed by the central government. He has submitted a self-declaration electronically or otherwise in such form, in such manner, containing such information as may be prescribed by the central government. An application for registration should be in such form along with such documents, including Aadhaar number as may be prescribed by the central government. Such worker shall be assigned a distinguishable number on to his application. So the gig workers or a platform workers or an unorganized worker, unless he register with these formalities, he will not be given any benefit under the social security. So every worker has to register and he will be given a number to his application that he has to put everywhere wherever he wants to avail the benefits under the social security scheme. So this is a registration of the workers to get the fund. And now for the first time, a social security fund is also created. This fund is now created for paying these benefits to workers, and it will be funded by the central and state government and also through CSR funding. So for you, it is required to be noted that CSR funding is also now allowed to make the payments under the Social Security Fund. To make the payments for the gig workers, platform workers, and other home-based workers, the Social Security benefits will be paid from this Social Security Fund. Aggregators who are digital intermediaries employing gig workers will have to set aside at least around 1 to 2% of their annual turnover, amount not exceeding 5% of the amount payable to the workers for the purpose of this Social Security Fund. So 1 to 2%, they have to still confirm the total percentage. It is 1 to 2% for the aggregators. They have to deposit this amount to the Social Security Fund. Hopefully, related rules may be announced in the coming days so that more clarity will be available as to how employers will estimate the total amount payable to the worker to set aside an appropriate amount. As I mentioned it to you, it is not 1 or 2, maximum 5%. A definite number will be given in the coming days so as to get more clarity on this issue. The law also states that the central government may provide self-assessment of contribution by aggregators, leaving scope for regularization. So they're also proposing this kind of self-assessment schemes to avoid any kind of confusion or leaving scope for manipulations. A self-assessment scheme is likely to come up in the future for the benefit of the aggregators only, not for the others. But for all of you, it is necessary to note down that under CSR funding is also permissible to the Social Security Fund. That is one important thing. And now the fines and penalties are also very stringent under this code. And this code imposes enhanced and stringent penalties for employers if they fail to pay their mandated contribution under the Social Security scheme. Any failure by an employer to pay contribution mandated under this code would attract imprisonment for a minimum period of 1 year, extendable up to 3 years, and a fine of 1 lakh. Now, there is no choice for the court except to send in jail in case of PF and ESI not paid. So minimum imprisonment is 1 year along with a fine of 1 lakh. And for the employers who do not provide the prescribed maternity benefit to their employees could face imprisonment period of 1 year and a fine of 50,000. So maternity benefit is to be provided for all the women employees mandatorily, otherwise the imprisonment is now compulsory. For repeated offenders under the code, minimum imprisonment of 2 years, extendable up to 5 years, and a fine of 3 lakh has been prescribed. So if you look at it, it is presently 5,000, 10,000, and no mandatory imprisonment. But now once this code is introduced, there is compulsory imprisonment when the fine of 1 lakh is the minimum, which can be extended up to 5 lakhs in certain cases, which is a very stringent penalty or a punishment for the employers in case they failure to pay the contributions for the social security schemes. So it is a big blow for the employers. And as I mentioned it to you, in the prosecution also, a prior opportunity will be given to the management in case they want to file a case, criminal case. The inspector cum facilitator or any other officer notified for the purpose of this question, the central government or state government shall, before initiation of prosecution proceeding against an employer for any offense under this chapter, give an opportunity to the employer to comply with the aforesaid relevant provisions by a written direction, which shall lay down a time period for such compliance. As we mentioned, it's a kind of show cause notice to be given to comply the procedures. And if the employer complies with the direction within such period, then no such proceeding shall be initiated against the employer. But no such opportunity shall be accorded to an employer if the violation of the same nature of the provisions is repeated within a period of 3 years from the date on which first violation has been committed. So before filing a criminal case, a show cause notice will be given, and if the offense is complied, then there will be no action. But no such a prior opportunity will be given if it is repeated within the 3 years. So yes, this Social Security Code is very stringent in penalties and punishments when compared to other codes, because it is all money related issues, because PF, ESI, gratuity, maternity benefit, bonus, everything is related to money. This code is slightly stringent when compared to other codes. Therefore, we have to advise the employers and managements to be careful while dealing with this kind of statutory payments. Composition of offences, as we mentioned in the code on wages, there is a possibility to compound the offences if it is the first time. Not like other codes, any offense committed for the first time, punishable with fine only, or punishable with an imprisonment which term not less than 1 year, and also with fine, may on application made either before or after the institution of the prosecution be compounded by the officer authorized by the central government for the purposes of offences relating to EPF and ESI only. For them, there is a permissibility to compound the offences. For the other offences relating to the provisions of the code and rules, regulations, and scheme, the appropriate government will fix the fine amount. In case of the offence punishable with fine, half of the maximum fine provided for that offence. In case of an offence punishable with an imprisonment for a term which is not more than 1 year, and also with fine, 3/4 of the maximum fine provided for that offence. So by taking these amounts, the government can compound the offences which are already filed or yet to be filed before the criminal court. The cases can be closed by filing this kind of amounts as prescribed under this section. It is only under the Social Security Code. As we have seen in the newspapers, Aadhaar card application is the only section brought under the purview of the Social Security Code. It is now implemented. This section 142 relating to Aadhaar is now being implemented under this code. The purpose of this implementation is everybody has to link their Aadhaar card to get their Social Security benefits. Suppose they want to get in the PF advance or ESI benefit, they have to link their Aadhaar with their PF and ESI accounts. Otherwise, the workers will not be given any benefit. That is why this section says an employee or unorganized worker or any other person, as the case may be, for registration as a member of or a beneficiary or seeking benefit, whether in kind, cash, or medical sickness benefit, or pension, gratuity, or maternity benefit, or any other benefit, or for withdrawal of fund, or availing any services of a career center, or receiving any payment or medical attendance as insured person himself or for his dependents under this code or rules, regulations, or scheme made or framed thereunder shall establish his identity, or as the case may be, the identity of his family members or dependents through Aadhaar number. Without the Aadhaar, the employees or unorganized workers or gig workers, they will not be given any benefit. Now, therefore, even though the total code has not been brought into implementation, only this particular section was brought into force to permit the workers to avail some benefits if they linked their Aadhaar with their social security scheme. So the Aadhaar is made compulsory for anything which is now to be taken under this code. Without Aadhaar and without their family members linking to the Aadhaar numbers, they are not entitled for any benefits under this code. Now, if you look at it, because of the changes in this code, do we need to change the policies or procedures, or it is only the wage structure you have to rechange? Because if 50% should be basic and DA, shall we need to change all our policies, existing policies or procedures? Yes, it is not only the definition of wage that is expected to change. For example, the concept who is a worker is now clearly defined. The term employee is also defined clearly. and it includes worker. Therefore, our HR policies, our leave policies, or maternity benefit policies, or any other policies which related to employees are required to be redefined, and it is to be restructured again. And there are few provisions such as one that regulate the working hours, overtime, annual leave that apply to workers and not to all the employees. So there are different concepts, and now different views are now become possible for worker and an employee. So different provision, different policies are required to be framed, keeping in view of the new code which is coming into play. Therefore, it is important that every employer needs to relook their HR policies, organization structure, role and responsibility of every employee to understand the impact of the provisions of the code and realign as required. So you can advise all your clients to change their policies which are now existing, and they have to slightly modify the procedures which are now being followed, and there will be change in the law after the introduction of this new codes hereafter. And now for the women employees also, there is one important issue. I thought it is relevant to mention to all of you. The employment of women in all types of work and night shift is permitted. Chapter 10 of the Occupation Safety and Health Code prescribes special provisions relating to the employment of women and are entitled to be employed in all establishments for all type of work. And they may also be employed with their consent before 6 a.m. and beyond 7 p.m. in the night. Earlier, there was a prohibition. Women workers cannot be employed after 9 p.m. Now, the women workers can be employed in all the times, but with their consent if they are before 6 a.m. and beyond 7 p.m. These provisions are given for the women employees now, as like any other manufacturing company or any other sector. The women employees can be employed anywhere at any time. But this is subject to conditions relating to holidays, working hours, and adequate safety, which shall prescribe it in the rules. So women workers, suppose they engaged in the night shift, they should be given a security and dropping facility at their home. So these are the important provisions which are incorporated in this code. I think with this, my presentation is completed, and I have covered the main important related issues relating to the profession, particularly relating to wages, bonus, PF, ESI, gratuity, and the women workers and other parts of the code, which are, in my opinion, these are the only issues which are relevant for all of you. Thank you for your patient listening, and I am very happy to look at all of you. And I think I have covered a majority of the issues. And if you have any questions, we can answer this.
Any questions, members? Unmute yourself and you can ask directly the speaker, or else you can post it in the chat box also.
Yeah.
Sir, is there any change on overtime policy?
Yes, sir. No change in overtime. Same existing under the Factories Act and Shops Act. The same thing is going to continue. So no much changes, sir, in overtime.
Okay.
Sir, are there any exceptions when you said the settlement to be made when the employee is leaving the company, or after handing over the laptop or other this thing? So on those grounds, can the employer take any extra time beyond 2 days? What you said?
There is no such relaxation is given, sir. They are not concerned about the management problems. They are only looking at the workers' side.
Employee,
So they say within 2 days you have to settle their account. How can it be possible? The 2 days, many of the employees working at different sites, suppose a person of Hyderabad, the office working at Vizag. So he resigned. So he has to come here, settle his account, submit all the belongings of the company. Then only his settlement can be made. But without considering all of these things, sir, they have simply passed the act, which is going to create more problems after once it is being implemented.
Yes, yes.
as my problem, sir, with my little experience, I can say, the more powers are given for the trade union leaders. In fact, now the trade union activity has come down across the India. There is no trade union activity with the like leaders of Datta Samanta or some kind, that kind of stature of trade union leaders are not there. Everybody gone. Now they are giving hope for all these trade union leaders, chota, small leaders are getting again power to blackmail the managements.
That may lead to exploitation. Yeah, they may misuse the power.
Yes, definitely, sir. Because suppose in balance sheet that clause is not mentioned, and then prosecuting the management for that. It is
Yeah.
too filing a claim that I am entitled for bonus, I am entitled for wages, increment, that is a different thing which can be defended. But filing a criminal case and dragging the managements to the court.
Yeah, too much punishment also to the management, employer.
Correct, sir, correct. That should have been avoided, unnecessary. And the present system is working well. So when suppose an audited balance sheet, somebody wants to question, what competency the trade union leader had?
Yes.
Suppose you audited a balance sheet. What capacity I have to say that this position is wrong, that item is wrong, that is not as per that section? If I know something, you can ask me, but a trade union leader who is a roadside fellow.
No, most of them are politically influenced, not having any knowledge about the subject or literates.
Exactly, sir. So giving that kind of power is not necessary.
So for disciplinary action on workers and staff,
Sir.
so for workers separate act, and for staff who is drawing salary, management staff separate act. So what type of act we need to follow for these two separate things for workers and management?
So workers, sir, governed by if they are working in a factory, they are governed by Standing Orders Act.
Okay, sir.
The employees who are working in the corporate offices or shops or maybe not in manufacturing activity are governed by Shops and Establishments Act. So the disciplinary action, Shops and Establishment Act and the Standing Orders Act definitely defined. So the provisions almost the same, issuing of a charge sheet, conduct an inquiry, and then giving an inquiry officer report and then terminate.
Okay,
so
sir.
this is the practice applicable for both of them.
So workers can approach labor courts. So then management staff, they have an issue. They also
They want to question their termination. They have to go before a civil court because they are not a workman.
Management staff
Approach the civil court for a suit for damages.
For my staff for more than 15,000 salary. Those people.
No, sir. Only merely because they are 10,000 salary, they cannot be called as a management staff. If now somebody is getting 20,000, 25,000, merely because getting 25,000 is not a manager. A person who got the managerial power, take a disciplinary action, he can grant leave, he can take independent decisions. Those are the managers.
So suppose if the worker is earning around 18,000, 20,000, so still he is covered under worker and standing orders.
The salary is not the sole criteria. Salary plus managerial powers. If both are being together, then he is the manager.
Okay.
Now, otherwise, everybody in this now Amazon and big companies, like everybody is getting 40, 50,000. So 50,000 cannot make them a non-worker. You should have managerial power.
Okay.
And clearly, designation is not only sufficient. If you fancily designate him as area manager, but that fellow is a glorified clerk. He doesn't have the area manager powers. So in such circumstances, they are workers only.
Okay, sir.
Sir.
Sir, one question in the chat box.
Yes, sir.
I'm working in health sector. Recently received a call from Employment Exchange that 25% recruitment should be done through them. Is this true, sir?
Not mandatory, sir. It is not mandatory. Employment exchanges are only recommendatory. They cannot force management to take employees from their employment exchange, nor it is obligatory for the employer to engage through employment exchange. It is an advisory, and it cannot, nobody can force the management to take through employment exchange. That is an option, sir.
Members, any more queries?
I have given my email ID, sir. If somebody has any issues, please kindly write to me. I will respond to their email ID.
But what she says, but they said that it is mandatory and fine will be levied if it is not complied. 25% recruitment should be done through employment exchange.
Yes, sir. That act itself is now being removed because of this code. The compulsory employment exchange vacancies notification act, sir. You have to notify. I have 10 vacancies. You notify, but it is not mandatory to take
Through them.
through that. You have to just notify. And that act also now been repealed. Now because of this code, that act is gone. So actually there is no force for that act now. So they can't force anybody, sir.
Any more queries, members?
Sir, nowadays apprentices are very rare to find, but some new people are joining with the less skill,
Now,
like casual labor. Like they will come
now,
for 1 month. If they are okay, they will continue. Otherwise, they only will stop. So for them, we are putting in the role ESI, PF is a little bit difficult for us. So how to go about those internship or training persons?
trainee, if you take them under a training scheme, merely saying, calling them a trainee is not sufficient. You have to pay them stipend, not a salary. And there should be a trainee agreement. And if they are taking under the Apprenticeship Act, recommended by the Apprenticeship Council, then they are excluded. If you call somebody taken as a trainee, you have to establish there was a training module, and what is exactly the training given, and what is the necessity of the training.
Then those new workers also should be put in the role, or is there any other option here?
No option. You have to see, if you have to statutorily follow, you have to pay PF and ESI for day one.
Okay.
No exemption.
Okay.
Any more questions, members? Hope there are no more queries from the members, sir.
Yes, sir.
So now I request the Secretary Prashant Kumar to propose vote of thanks.
Respected Chairman, C.S. Muralidhara Garu, learned speaker and senior advocate, C. Niranjan Rao Garu, past chairmen and senior members of the profession and other dignitaries. Good evening to all. I am privileged to propose vote of thanks for the session on my own behalf and behalf of the Visakhapatnam members. Sir, I convey my heartfelt gratitude for accepting our invitation and sharing your valuable knowledge with our Visakhapatnam branch members, sir. Sir, your vibrant deliberations on new labor codes and its payment implications with reference to the statutory payments are given insight and enlightenment to our members, sir. Sir, your special focus on the changes in the definitions of worker, employee, floor wages, and explanation of the changes in the Social Security Act 2020 with with respect to the new additions made in the and penalties provisions are extremely covered and exhaustively covered and extremely well, sir. Thank you very much for your delighted deliberation, sir. Thank you very much. Members, request your attention for the upcoming session, that is on Schedule 3 and Karo, and speaker is CA Ganesh from Hyderabad on 29th September. Request all the members, please join and got benefit out of it. Thank you one and all.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, thank you very much, sir. We'd like to have one physical session with you once this code implementation comes into force.
Definitely, sir. Pleasure.
We
Next
are
time, Vizag
pleased to
వచ్చి
receive you.
కలుస్తాను. వాసు.
Please, sir, whenever you come to Vizag, just give a call, sir. We'll meet, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Sir,
sir.
you
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Prashant garu.
So many doubts from members, sir.
ఏం ప్రశాంత్ గారు?
మీ సెషన్ ద్వారా చాలా డౌట్స్ క్లారిఫై అయ్యాయి.
ఫోన్లేదు. థ్యాంక్ఫుల్. ఏమన్నా ఉంటే నాకు యూ టేక్ మై మెయిల్ ఐడి అండ్ మై మొబైల్ నెంబర్ ఉంది.
Yeah, we will share it, sir. Please send this PPT PowerPoint presentation to our mail, sir, so that we will circulate to members, sir.
పంపిస్తాను ఇప్పుడే పంపిస్తాను.
Okay, okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Namaste. Namaste.